are suggesting, and as elaborating on what Rick said, that even if we're excited about now, it doesn't mean that the larger structures of your life are easily or gracefully going to absorb or assimilate what it is you're doing. And so when we have quincunxes, it's often like, oh, we go to one side and then we're sort of pulled to the other. So if you're pulled to the Saturn side and you feel slow down, it's tempting to flip over to Uranus and go, oh, I don't give a crap, or I'm out of here. I'm just blowing this shit up. And obviously that is not necessarily the most conscious and constructive response to innovation.
And it may not ultimately work because Saturn, in some ways, Saturn is the law. Saturn is karma, and Uranus is instantaneous. So it's almost like these two planets not getting along right now. You said the quincunx was an aspect of them grinding. I can see the Uranus with a WTF question mark under it. It's like these planets can't get out of the same box, but they can't see each other either. They're like stuck in each other's world. And so it's almost like this quincunx says that if you don't pay attention to both ends of this spectrum, that instant karma, instant Uranus, karma Saturn, will get you. And so we can't just ignore it. And there's two things here that I said were tied up with this new moon, aside from the things that were obvious that we talked about. One of them is the Uranus quincunx to Saturn, and that Saturn acting as a bit of an anchor and Saturn holding us back a bit. But Saturn is the key or ruling planet to Capricorn, and we have another bit of an anchor that's cooking in the sign of Capricorn on the same day as the Saturn quincunx Uranus, just a couple days after the new moon.
And that is that Pluto, the mythological lord of the underworld, stops moving forward in the zodiac. It's called a station, and it's a retrograde station because it stops in its beginning to move retrograde or backwards. Now, Pluto is powerful but often subtle. I think this is a very subtle kind of transition. But what it means, when planets go retrograde, I think they go inward, suggesting that the transformation, the potency, as well as the fear that Pluto represents can be revisited from the inside out. And I think an important thing about Pluto is its relationship to healing. Healing often involves getting into more pain than you're in right now so that you can move out of the whole system of woundedness. And Pluto going retrograde, if you do feel pullback to old fears, hopefully you can use this as a means to reassess them and perhaps to transform them.
And although we often talk about Mercury retrograde because it's the fastest moving planet forward, and when it stops to go retrograde, it's like driving your car 40 miles an hour, slamming on the brakes and putting it in reverse. You know there's been a change of direction. You can feel the change of momentum. Pluto has been cruising along at 1/2 of an inch a week. And so the brake gets slammed on and it goes into reverse at 1/10 of an inch a week, and you may not notice it, but you notice something, like Jeff said. It's subtle, but in homeopathy, it's the most subtle things that are the most powerful things. And so just because it's subtle, excuse me, just because it's subtle, doesn't mean that it's not powerful. And I think that understanding something else about retrogrades, which you've heard me say or us say in reference to the Mercury or Venus retrogrades, and that is that a planet that goes retrograde means that astronomically it's closer to Earth. So I agree with Jeff, the energy goes inward, but the reason why the energy goes inward is that as a planet gets closer to Earth, the energy intensifies. And the energy intensifies, and it doesn't work with our normal relationships in the outer world, so we tend to hold it in. And when we tend to hold it in, it gains power because that which we don't express becomes projected. What we repress or suppress gains in psychological power. And therefore, this Pluto station in Capricorn, in some ways, is saying the same thing as the Uranus quincunx to Saturn, it's saying that this obvious stuff, there's an acute symptom on the surface. You got a 106-degree fever, you're hot, you're ready to go. All these planets are in Aries. There's a new moon in Aries. Kapow, that's where the acute energy is. But the subtle energy is what's going to win. And if we don't pay attention to it, it can do us in.
Yeah, well put. I want to talk about time control for two reasons. One is I don't want us to run out of tape so that we can record this, but we're also getting on the 13th of April, Mercury, the planet of intellect, the communication planet, fires into speedy Aries. So what Mercury's move into Aries does is it takes all of this freshness, newness, independence, spontaneity, intuition. It has it operate on an intellectual level. But then the parade of planets into slow-moving Taurus starts 2 days later. So the irony is we may be moving in an Aryan, fresh, new direction, and then around the 13th, when Mercury goes in, our brains are cooking fast enough, the wheels are spinning fast enough.
Fast. Crazy
see
fast.
what's going on, but then Venus, the Sun, and Mars all move into Taurus.
And you can watch it here up on the screen, and we're looking right over here as Venus and then the Sun and then Mars all move into Taurus through the 21st. And and I think you're right, Jeff, the irony of being set up, and that's why this discussion of the Saturn-Uranus quincunx and the Pluto retrograde, that's why if we get tricked into thinking that the Aries thing is the only show in town, we're screwed.
Or life becomes more complicated and enlightenment goes on a more interesting
and
path.
Yet, if we do recognize it, we can give great stability and solidity to those things which were ideas or seeds early on.
Absolutely. Venus, the planet of love, pleasure, and self-worth, entering her earthy home sign Taurus on the 15th, represents slowing down our evaluations of others, but also slowing down to smell the roses or the coffee. Venus in Taurus is very sensual. It's about enjoying the physical pleasures of life, and if that's going to be available to us, why be in a hurry?
And I think that this whole idea of not being in a hurry really becomes the key lesson. We're set up to hurry. But as these planets move into Aries, starting with Venus, but Venus, the Sun, and Mars, each of them by the end of the month will go opposite Saturn and form a harmonious trine to Pluto in Capricorn. That's earth energy. It's grounding. It deepens it. It intensifies it. And so there's this sense of these planets into Taurus actually do say, stop and smell the coffee, but make sure it's a dark French roast.
Well, yeah, that's because of Pluto and Saturn.
Yes.
Because Taurus is about ease and comfort. So planets moving into Taurus may expect that things will be easier and more comfortable. But the opposition to Saturn in Scorpio says, what? You're trying to plant things in this garden? I need mulch. I need rotten meat and vegetables. Give me your crap so that I can grow the beautiful things that you want to grow. And we can look at Saturn and Scorpio opposing planets in Taurus like babies. Oh, they didn't like me. Oh, they didn't support me. Oh, they made it a little bit harder for me. Or we can recognize that there are external teachers. External because oppositions are about another person, usually. There are external teachers and circumstances that can look like they're demanding and making things harder, but if we can stay the course, we can sort of dig the groove deeper and enrich the earth of our life's experience considerably.
And this mixture of these planets moving opposite Saturn, difficult, meeting responsibility, hitting the wall, and the planets forming these harmonious trines with Pluto that really deepen the energy. It can sweeten it in a very dark, it's brown sugar, it's not white refined sugar. There's a darkness, there's a muskiness to, to these trines to Pluto, and they occur throughout the last week of April, starting with Venus's trine to Pluto on April 24th and continue on through the beginning of next month.
Yeah, the thing you brought up about the different kind of sweetener is very good, because Taurus can be childlike and simplistic, but Pluto and Saturn are very mature, so it's about developing adult tastes. And one of the things, while Taurus often is looking for something to be content with in an uncomplicated way, both Saturn and Pluto are suggesting that you could have an even deeper and richer experience and even more reward if your tastes are not so simple and narrow. So we have Venus in Taurus on the 15th. The Sun goes into Taurus on the 19th, and I think we've talked about the Aries-Taurus transition, and the 20th is one of those weird days. Mars, the action planet, moves into Taurus, where Mars generally isn't its happiest self. Because Mars, the fighter, the battler, the engine of movement or action, has to slow down in Taurus, and yet on that very same day, April 20th, Mercury, firing along, blazing minds in Aries, joins psychedelic Uranus for some mind-blowing, crazy, chaotic, brilliant, intellectual energy.
Yeah, it is really weird, Jeff, and Mars doesn't necessarily like slowing down in Taurus.
No.
But it's still conjuncting the Sun. It's still close. I mean, it's still so close to the Sun that there is some energy. It's
strong will.
It's strong will, and the will and that strong will may bump into just as much of a strong will on the outside, right. And yet that Mercury conjunct Uranus basically says thoughts are uncontainable. Thoughts are irrepressible. This is, psychedelic is good, but it's more like it's electric psychedelic. This is like kapow. This is it's irrepressible.
And yet, repression comes the next day when Mercury squares Pluto. The stressful 90-degree angle between Pluto and Mercury, and Rick talked about Pluto and Capricorn earlier as imposing a kind of accountability, says that we can quickly move from something exciting, electric, and intellectually stimulating to, oh crap, these were unconsidered consequences, or these are additional practices that I have to go through if this germ of a brilliant new idea is actually going to take hold and get anywhere. And Rick talked earlier this evening about the Uranus-Pluto square 2012, 2015. I mean, we could talk about this every month and I think make a contribution to collective consciousness. But every time a faster moving planet like Mercury triggers that, it's another reminder of this sort of battle we're in about freedom and new with Uranus and power and control with Pluto. So it comes up again later this month.
And as if that's not enough, we then get, just a couple days later, the first of 3 eclipses. We're coming into eclipse season now. This eclipse is a full moon eclipse. Jeff earlier said, as sweet and as yummy and as impulsive as the new moon is or will be on the 10th, the full moon on the 26th is a bit tougher, but this full moon, which I'll bring up here exactly in a moment, this full moon is not just a full moon, it's a full moon eclipse, and it's the first of 3 eclipses over the next month and a half.
Yeah, and when Rick and I look at new moon charts, full moon charts, like many astrologers, what we're noticing is the relationship of the other planets to that new or full moon. And this one is not just a full moon in Scorpio, it's an eclipse. So the full moon in Scorpio always raises the issue for that Taurus sun. Listen, chubby, are you just going to sit there on that same damn sofa for the rest of your life?
Eating the same sandwich, watching the same rerun of something.
And comfortable, drooling with contentment, beaming like a sacred cow. Well,
not this one.
No, it meets the slaughterhouse of the Scorpio moon, which is really about deconstruction.
You mean it meets the slaughterhouse of Saturn in Scorpio?
No, of the Scorpio full moon.
Taurus meets the
meets
Scorpio.
Thank you.
That's
Sorry, right.
Sorry.
So that's got its own intensity. We'll get to the eclipse part, but in traditional astrology, there were two planets that weren't nice. Mars, because it's too aggressive, and Saturn, because it's too rigid and limited. Mars is conjunct the sun at the time of this full moon. Saturn is conjunct the moon. And Mars and Saturn are in a wide opposition to one another, but this is heavy stuff. Now, how it can manifest, there are so many different levels, both positive and negative, but it's that dark roast Rick was talking about earlier gets darker here.
Burnt.
And certainly in a collective way or in the news, this might have to do with economic stuff. Taurus is money, product. Scorpio is the manipulation of the movement of the borrowing or exchanging of money. Boy, that might be some belt tightening, that might be some crisis. And certainly on a personal level, it's about resources, where I'm trying to push ahead. Mars in Taurus has that persistence, and the moon and Saturn in Scorpio are going again. Is this the right investment? Are you looking deeply enough? Because if not, you're going to waste a lot of money, a lot of love, a lot of energy. So this is very, very powerful. It touches the issue of resources and the north node of the moon. Eclipses occur when there are new moons or full moons within about 14 degrees of the lunar nodes. This one, we have the north node, the point of growth in Scorpio, which says, when in doubt, throw it out. Don't defend you ever get in an argument with somebody and you're defending and you're battling, and then at some point, and not because of their argument, but you just get it, why am I fighting for this cause? Do I really care, or did I just get hooked up into this adrenaline Mars thing? And with Mars and the sun in Taurus, it's pretty easy to bait someone into that kind of standing up for something with a ferocity that is really unexamined. And so what this means is pick your battles carefully, because it's a combative full moon.
I agree with everything you said, and I think that this is a tough full moon. I mean, just Mars's opposition to Saturn, which isn't exact for, does it happen this month? It's
no.
It happens the beginning of June, but as Jeff said, it's within just
May.
Beginning of May. It's just within a few degrees. And that Mars-Saturn opposition in itself, which builds for a week or so, Mars says, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Saturn says, slow down. Mars says now, Saturn says, wait. Because it's an opposition, it often, as Jeff said earlier, it often appears in our lives through relationship. We're hot to trot, and reality is saying, not on your life. Now, what happens, though, is I think ultimately we have a way to work with this energy, because after the full moon, the moon forms a harmonious sextile with Pluto, and then over the next week, the sun, and over the next couple of weeks, the sun and Mars also form harmonious trines with Pluto that can take this immovable, frustrating, belt-tightening, there ain't enough to go around energy, and say, we need to make some deep changes, not this surface bullshit that's going to get us through the next hour, but if we can go to those deeper issues, we actually may be able to accomplish something here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get anyone's hopes up.
No, but I think that's a great idea. That idea of giving it a little more time, not precipitating a crisis if you're really unprepared for it, if you really haven't thought it through and done the gaming of it in advance. And I think that's a very good point, Rick, because Mars has that immediacy, and the simplicity of Taurus is just, if I'm not going to get it now, I'm never going to get it. And yet Saturn in Scorpio, the moon in Scorpio, the north node in Scorpio, all of which are ruled by or connected to Pluto, suggest, if you just suck it up for a minute, or a day, or 2 or 3 days, you can come back to what looked like an impasse with a perspective that shows you a better way.
And by the way, the Sun opposition to Saturn is on the 28th, and the Mars opposition is on the 30th. It does happen before the month is out. So this energy of this full moon eclipse builds the eclipse comes and goes, but the frustration does not.
Yeah, the image that I have, this is thick. Taurus is thick. Scorpio is thick. Saturn is thick. Mars in a thick sign is thick. And I just had this image that if you're willing to stir the stew or the soup slowly and patiently, you can make something that's extraordinary. You can empower yourself. You can discover resources. You may be moving towards creating things for which you thought there weren't sufficient resources.
Yeah, and I would say the flip side of that is if you don't push and stir that thick, almost like molasses in January kind of stew, it'll not only stick to the pot, but it'll ruin the pot because it's almost like an alloy. It's almost like a, copper tin that makes bronze, because as that cools, it's so thick that this is like an opportunity, even if it takes work to get into it. If you don't take the opportunity now, the opportunity will be lost and it'll solidify. It'll be much harder in a few days or a few weeks.
Great, yeah. And I think this full moon is sort of like an alchemist's dream, because we're dealing at such a primal level with Taurus, Scorpio, Mars, and Saturn, that there is the possibility to tap into energy, matter, at, again, that very, very basic level where things can really be changed. However, this is not for beginners, this is not for amateurs, and this is not for the impatient. This is a highly powerful but potentially toxic experience. So, if you're going to dig in a place where you're committed, where you're willing to learn, where you have some experience. I don't think it's a full moon eclipse for amateurs.
I agree with you. The problem is kind of like when we say, this life sucks, I want to do something better. This is not for amateurs, but there's nowhere else to go. Whether we're amateurs or not, we're in it and we're playing this game. This is the problem, is that we don't have a choice. We can't say, oh, this one's too difficult, I'm not going to play at all, even though it's
I mean, if you're in pain or going through stuff.
Whatever, we still have to play. We can't just say, oh, this is only if you've earned the right to play this game. We're all in this.
Well, the positive aspects, as you pointed out earlier, of the sun's trine to Pluto specifically, again suggests if you take your time, maybe you can develop a depth of maturity very quickly over a matter of days. It can come quickly, just don't rush it.
Right, and that sun's trine to Pluto is actually on May 1st. Theoretically, we're not supposed to say nothing in May.
Our contract
says we can't talk about May
we're in trouble
April.
Again.
But the fact is that on May 1st, the sun is exactly trining Pluto, followed just a few days later by Mars, and then followed just only a week later by Mercury. And so the point is that as stuck as things might feel during this full moon, as frustrated as we might be, there's an absolute deeper process going on that can be that alchemical process that the alembic, that the container, if it can hold, actually can make magic.
Yeah, I agree. And we can see that in our own lives in very simple ways. If you have an ongoing issue that's frustrated you, that's not just circumstantial, but really reflects your psyche because you've attracted it before and you've responded or reacted before, there's a hell of a load of psychotherapy going on in a short period of time if you are willing to engage your shadow, which is Scorpio land, which is Pluto land. It can be scary as hell and really rewarding. So part of the dance, the innocent Mars in Taurus, Sun in Taurus dance is recognizing that there's much more to any story that we're dealing with. And if you're willing, again, to go deeper, you might get a happy ending or certainly an exciting and a rewarding one. Well, thank goodness April only has 30 days, because when this happens on a 31-day month.
Well, we took the 31st day by going to May 1st.
That's
so
right.
It's,
That's
it's
right.
like, yeah, well. Here's where we take a break.
Yeah, so that's our overview. We're going to take a little bit of a break now. Put your first name, your date of birth, your time of birth, and your place of birth on the table behind our videographer, Julie, and you will be eligible for the drawing, and then we'll look at 3 of the charts after the break.
And thank you all for coming out and making this a lovely and wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good. Sure. Boy, that one's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, May will be a lot better. There's only you're in this split up square.
Yeah, but that's always there. It's always there. Thank you, Miss Julie. Appreciate it.
Oh, did I give you one already? Yeah. Good move. Thanks, Julie.
It's Altamont. I can't get off the stage. You see the Rolling Stones at Altamont, where the guy killed in the audience. Oh.
First time I rode the bus, it picked me up hitchhiking. Took me clear across town. He said, I ain't got no money. He said, that's all right, friend, just get on board and lay your burden down. He said, where you going? He said, I ain't got that part figured out yet. Life is so uncertain, yeah, and the future is not set. I'll let you know when we get there, though. That's a fact. I've been all around the world, babe, and I keep coming back. I rode that Fremont Bridge so high one time I could have scratched old Mr. Moon right in the chin. Saw that water in the canal down there below, and I thought to myself, I'm gonna dive right in. Yeah, but I'm too young to go that way, and I ain't ready yet. I don't mind falling that far, I just don't want to get that wet. It's a carnival of circumstance. You have to have a knack. I've been all around the world, babe. I keep coming back. We are born of nature, and in nature we will die. Oh, and if we don't make it, it's not because we didn't try. No, it's not because we didn't try. They say they will incorporate the world over my dead body, over my dead body, over my dead body, over mine. They have all the money, but we have the will, and I would rather be a match than a paper dollar bill. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. They have the guns, all we are is flesh and blood, but we will multiply our numbers and drown them in our flood. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. They say they will incorporate the world over my dead body, over my dead body, over my dead body, over mine. They have all the power, that's what they say, but we will turn those tables, take their power away. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. We will not be dissuaded, and we will not turn around. We will face the barricades, and we will tear them down. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. They say they will incorporate the world over my dead body, over my dead body, over my dead body, over mine. You can call me a fool, That's alright with me. I will live to see this good round world breaking free. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. They say they will incorporate the world over my dead body, over my dead body, over my dead body, over mine. They say they will incorporate the world over my dead body, over my dead body, over my dead body, over mine. If I could face the day the way the sunlight does, if I could rise with the morning mist, then I would know the way that the waterfish swims. I could hold the lessons in my fist. We are dying, say the elders, and we don't even know this is only a temporary peace. We're only waiting for the outcome to show and the endings to be released. Behind the silence of a great stone wall, the howling of a new wilderness, beyond the distance of a great stone wall, it will change, it will change. It wasn't always like this. I've been to places where the clocks don't tick and they laugh at the hard straight line, where history looks through a baby's eyes and the light of the future is a good sign. Some laws are made of barbed wire and they lean to the privileged few, but reality shoots from behind a blade of grass and its aim is true. Behind the silence of a great stone wall, the howling of a new wilderness, beyond the distance of a great stone wall, it will change, it will change. It wasn't always like this. Well, there's a warfare fought in the bloodstream now, and truth is a thing to be praised. The lie gets mean and it hides in the marrow and awaits for the stakes to be raised. And the dry, rattled breath of the exit time is a wake-up call to your ear. But the feel of a fist at the end of your arm is the answer to your tears. Behind the silence of a great stone wall, the howling of a new wilderness, beyond the distance of a great stone wall, it will change, it will change. It wasn't always like this.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a look at 3 charts.
Are you? Yeah.
John, Paul, and George.
Wait, they're playing my song.
Old people music.
They say it's my birthday.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, lately I've been putting in the charts and showing them as I'm doing them, and then the people who don't get selected leave. So Rick cleverly has hidden that information. So thank you for staying.
Except we're working on this. Now we got it.
So is Mark present?
You have to be present to win.
There you go.
Hey, Mark.
All right. You know, when I first began studying astrology, I had a method of analyzing a chart. But like most practicing astrologers over time, certainly like Rick, we gave up the method. Basically, you can start anywhere you want. It really doesn't matter.
Too many years of too many drugs for me.
And not enough years nor enough drugs for me. But one of the things we notice in looking at this chart, you see this red line with the arrow at the top? That's actually the north-south axis, also known as the meridian axis. And most of the planets are on the right side, which is actually west. Our astrological charts are the reverse of conventional maps. So this is what's called a setting chart. And a setting chart, or the whole western side of the chart, it doesn't mean that you don't have volition, Mark, but it does mean that you probably are more strategic and aware of others. That this side of the chart is like receiving the serve in tennis. Now, you can win the point, but there's much more of a focus on relationships, on other people, their needs, their fears, and responding and reacting to them.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeff, that's where you started because, I mean, what you say is true, and yet there's a Gemini moon that holds off the other side. In other words, when you look at the eastern side,
well, the Gemini moon doesn't hold anything.
No, but what it has to do in some ways is it has to balance the energy of everything else. And so it's that receiving the serve thing. There's the speed at which you can react. The mind
He's got a lot of moves.
It's got a lot of moves and is much faster than it might appear. In fact, with Cancer rising, the rising sign is often how we appear to people. And it's almost, I call this sometimes the invisibility cloak rising sign. There's a part of this which would be corroborated by what you, or would corroborate what you just said, and that is that I think one of the skills that you might have is showing up, but not necessarily with your agenda out in the open, and therefore you get to listen, take it in, and then respond before people really know that you're present, or that what you got, or what you're doing, or whatever. And yet there is a real agenda. I mean, we got 4 planets in Sagittarius, so you have an idea of where you want to get to. It's just that you're not necessarily always on the surface with it, I think.
Faithful to the same airline.
We just got a one thumb
corroboration.
Up. One out of 4 thumbs.
Oh, that was a thumb. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Gemini moon, the moon is emotion and feeling. Gemini is diverse, flexible, adaptable. That's
scattered,
yeah,
restless.
So and because it's over here on Mark's side of the chart, that does represent the variety of responses that he has. And so when Rick talked about an agenda, because Sagittarius has a direction. It's usually the wrong direction, but it has a direction.
And it never gets there,
but
it's still a direction.
Right, which is admirable in its own right. But the moon is such a powerful and important body in terms of representing our psyche that I think even with a serious sense of purpose or direction for Mark, he may be reasonably adaptable and flexible about how he gets there. At least that's a possible expression of that Gemini moon.
I think that's a great expression of the Gemini moon, but I don't think that's an expression of Mark. because he has Saturn square the Sun and Venus square Pluto. Let me break those down. Those are in some ways anything but flexible.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's still, your mind is dancing. There's a flexibleness in your thoughts, in your internal process. I think of the old Firesign Theater line that goes, "How can you be two places at once when you're nowhere at all?" That's a Gemini moon. It's all over the place. And yet, the Sun square Saturn is about overcoming other people's judgments of your either ineptness or
freakiness,
whatever. It often goes back to parental issues where there is something that where you're not recognized, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you're not whatever, you fill in your own story, but there's a need to in some way prove oneself by a very fixed agenda in a way. And then yet there's this other piece here, which is Venus, the planet of love, squaring Pluto, the planet of ruthless, powerful intentionality. And this is a chart, I think, that plays for keeps, even though it looks very casual.
Well, I think it's mixed, because I agree, Saturn, the planet of hard, cold reality in a right angle to the sun of identity and consciousness, certainly brings a strong degree of awareness about controlling the field. Yet Uranus, the planet of freedom, is trine or harmonized with the sun. So maybe it really comes down to this Venus-Pluto square. By the way, that's a tough aspect. Venus is love, lovability, self-worth. Pluto square Venus doesn't trust all that easily.
But the Sun trine Uranus doesn't care.
Right. So that's the thing. I wonder if it isn't for Mark that he makes the calculation. Intellectual Mercury in calculating Capricorn in the 7th house of others, and says, am I going to get what I want? Is this one worth it? Or is this another job, person, whatever, that's going to rip me off? If they're going to rip me off, if I get that, and you can start from a fairly skeptical place, I believe, even though I wouldn't call you a skeptic, then maybe you go to the Uranus mode and go bye-bye, or you go to the Saturn mode and you put up the wall. But I really think, you know, I think there's a lot of mobility here, although I agree with Rick that mobility may be anchored in some very strong core issues, mostly about not getting ripped off.
Yeah, and a lot of this can be cured with a lifetime of therapy.
Astrological therapy, local, neighborhood. Probably from, I'm guessing an Aries would probably be good for you. So one other thing I wanted to point out, Venus is love and evaluation. Pluto is about manipulation, or what it really means, I think, metaphysically, is a deeper examination of values and relationships, with the willingness or the necessity to go to the bottom of them and to experience sometimes pain and loss, but to really get a deeper sense of what you're worth and what makes you happy. And the sun is in the 8th house, which is other people's evaluation of us as well as shared resources. So I agree that there is more control and calculation here, but how it plays out can look flexible.
Sometimes we're so reliant on what a chart looks like on the screen that something can slip through the cracks. And I had the aspects to the moon turned off,
yeah.
and I got the word here from a couple people in the audience that said, what about the grand air trine? And you know, when we do this kind of thing on the spot, we kind of work our way through it and we talk about what comes into our mind. And this very important thing didn't come into either of our minds. Right. And that is that the sun, trine moon, trine Uranus.
And those are harmonious relationships.
The trine is harmonious relationship. Air is of the intellect. Uranus is Aquarius's key planet. The sun is in Aquarius. This is an intellectual brilliance that is self-sufficient and may or may not be relevant to anything out there, but is very, very sharp and intellectually, it's genius in a way.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that strikes me about it, Mark, is the notion that, you know, you're okay. You don't have to play. If somebody's going to be a pain in the ass, if somebody's going to be that much, fine. That grand trine is a sort of self-contained a capacity to entertain yourself and find meaning in your own life if we're too dumb to appreciate you.
Right, and whether it's meaningful or not. I mean, let's,
Thank you, Mark.
thanks. Is CC a name?
CC.
CC.
We
CC.
got your CC.
It's not like St. Francis of CC.
All right, now this is a very different tonality. We've got a Taurus sun, a Capricorn moon, and a Virgo rising, all of which are earth signs, which in principle means practicality, but there are certain countercurrents.
Yeah, actually, this chart is also a chart of someone who was born the day after an eclipse, because the sun is conjuncting the south node.
Several days.
3 days.
Right, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. I mean, but that in itself, the sun conjuncting the south node of the moon has a karmic kind of intensity to it. In Taurus, I mean, the first sense that I get is the fated or the fate aspect of this chart. That there's stuff that is not easily movable. That's just, you're born with it.
A redo life, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my guess is that CC would be hard to read. And the reason is, as a Taurus with a Capricorn moon, you figure, okay, this is pretty grounded, realistic person. I'm not saying that you're not, but Neptune, the planet of diffusion, confusion, illusion, is rising, and both of these are square or in a challenging right angle to this adorable, flirtatious, charming, gee, I'm the easiest person in the world, Venus-Mars conjunction. And there's a tough, much tougher, much stronger person, I think, below that sort of seemingly, how can I help you? And what kind of dance or music would you like from me? Because I can do it. But
well, we talked earlier about the Venus-Mars conjunction because that's going on this month, and the creativity and the excitement and the pleasantness and the creativity involved in that. And you have that Venus-Mars conjunction in Gemini, the sign, Jeff didn't say, the sign of the tap dancer, the sign of the clever, witty, easygoing, lighthearted person, and as Jeff said, with that sun in Taurus and the moon in Capricorn, there's a sense of, kind of determined, feet on the ground. This is who I am. This is where I'm going. And even though I can interact, I think of the Ken Kesey line, I can maybe with the best of them. You can do that dance, but you do it as a dance, not as who you are.
what's really interesting, a Capricorn moon, which according to astrological tradition isn't easy. It usually means having to grow up young, being more emotionally self-reliant. That moon is in a wide square, or right angle to Saturn, a little more than 8 degrees apart, which by some systems might mean that something happened around 8 that represented some wall or boundary in terms of the household. But what I'm thinking here is that maybe you were in an environment where you couldn't please other people. There's the moon in Capricorn, that there was something serious, and that here we have this Neptune rising. Well, maybe if I put on this show, or maybe if I put on this, Neptune is imagination, and the imagination of Neptune hooked into the very creative and playful Venus-Mars conjunction in Gemini would suggest, as Rick said, you're a great tap dancer. You're great at taking, situations that you don't want to engage in and going, yes, it's quite all right. And the next thing the person knows, you've ushered them out of the room and you never dealt with their stuff because you didn't want to. Yes?
May I?
Sure.
Can you tell me what your interpretation of Pluto conjunct the moon right now?
Yeah, we'll get there in just a moment. Yes.
Okay.
What I want to say, you know the term WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get. It's a computer term. What you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Well, this is WYSINWYG. This is what you see is not what you get. And that is because this veneer, and I don't mean it's artificial, but it's the presence, the interaction. There's a bit of a shapeshifter, of a you can conjure yourself into being what you need to be in a situation that still always comes back to what you are.
Yeah, the beauty is being a tricky Neptunian who people trust. That's what's so great.
Now,
you know, we trust.
You're gonna find out.
Yeah.
Well, we know. But the question that was asked actually was only half of a two-part question.
It's a half-assed question, is what you're saying.
Or some other anatomy,
Yeah.
I don't know. But the question was, what about Pluto conjuncting my moon? And that is that Pluto in the sky, which was here when Cece was born, Pluto has come around, and right now Pluto is really past the degree of the moon. Over the last couple of years, Pluto moved forward and backward and forward again over the moon. But over the last year, at the same time, Uranus, which was up there when she was born, has come around almost a complete time, and Uranus has been square to the moon. So the question really is a two-part question. What about Pluto in the sky transiting over my moon over the last couple of years, and Uranus over the last year or so squaring it? And I think the short answer is, on some level, you're through the eye of the needle, but it may take years for the ramifications to still, to settle in.
Yeah, because Pluto and Uranus have already aspected your moon, but they haven't hit Saturn yet. So it's almost like you might know what you need or what the hell you want to get away from. And yet somebody else, Saturn in Aries, is holding you back, or there's some unfinished piece that will probably finish next year or the year after when Uranus passes over Saturn. So on an event level, I mean, that can be a move, a change of house, but on a psychological level, what it is also, again, is revisiting some of the sort of coldness that you experienced in your childhood. It's revisiting some of the isolation or the responsibility that you had to take on. And from a psychological point of view, this can be a challenging but very rich time for throwing off another layer of shackles about duty, obligation, self-reliance, all of that stuff.
And I think the timing of this is probably, I mean, I think what you said is very, very true and very valuable, but transiting Saturn is in Scorpio, the sign opposite her sun. And so there's already a sense of things that you started perhaps about a dozen years ago on some level have taken their course, have come or coming to fruition. And in some ways, there's a period here of trying to figure out what is important enough to hold on to, and what of the garden has grown to fruition or will over the next year or two, and then needs to be left aside so you can move on unshackled by this kind of connection or these connections to the past.
Yeah, I think your North Node in Scorpio means just say no when you don't feel like it. That instead of beginning with availability and then having to split or put the defense up, I encourage you to allow that defense, at least in your own mind, to come up earlier so you don't waste time charming people who really won't fulfill your needs anyway. Thank you, Cece.
Thank you very much.
Rachel. Rachel and
Hi, Scarlett.
Hey, Scarlett.
Appropriately dressed, I should say.
Or appropriately named. We don't know. Chicken egg,
Right. Well, the outfit came before the baby.
We don't know.
Do you think? Well, it's kind of, it's funny. Here's a mom, I presume, or just a babysitter who looks so much like the kids she takes care of, but a mom. And look what we have. Rising in the chart, we have the moon, which is the symbol of mom. We've got Saturn, which is about 8 degrees away from the moon, encumbered, and yet in Sagittarius, you're here.
And that Saturn is exactly conjunct Uranus. This is the mom who's the mom and the dad and eclectic and different and does it her way and yet still has the sense of authority, responsibility, and tradition. That's one powerful signature. I mean, yeah. The Sagittarius. I mean, we haven't even talked about the Libra Sun or anything else. The Libra high noon in
Let's
the
not.
chart. That's fine, but just that powerhouse of that Sagittarius rising with all those planets right there.
Well, what that means to a certain extent, Rachel, is this is the first house of personality. Planets in the first house are like in our face. They're in the foreground of our experience. And for you, it's complicated. I have a daughter who's less than a year younger than you, and she has these 3 planets together. And really, I can't come up with a concise, clear interpretation, because this is order, this is freedom, and this one is, oh, well, whatever. You know, it's 10 degrees away, actually. I'm exaggerating here a little bit. But what that means is that you're likely to push yourself through extreme experiences just so that you can have that range of up, down, in, out, all over the place that represents.
Which is very un-Libra-like.
Yeah.
I mean, Libra is often looked at by astrologers as a bit of a lightweight sign because it's always about the relationship rather than about the self. And yet here we have such a strong statement of the differentiation between the relationship and the self. And on top of that, we have Mars in Aries, actually that Mars is retrograde, but it's still hanging out in Aries, and it's square to that Saturn and Uranus conjunction. This, again, we talked earlier tonight about some of the frustration of Saturn and Mars, Mars hot, Saturn cold, that gas pedal brake kind of thing. But in your chart, the gas isn't just gas Mars, it also is tied up with some sort of quantum explosion drive that is this instantaneous, the Uranus thing. And so there's this sense of how do you control that forward movement without finding yourself waking up in another galaxy, in another time-space continuum every time you get near the gas pedal.
Well, well, the beauty of it is, or the complexity of it is like you'll clean up whatever mess you make. You have Venus, the planet of love or self-worth or validation in Virgo, which is a sign of service and order and cleanliness, and it's joined the karmic south node of the moon. Really, you're like the person who, you know, now you got the kids, but this is certainly the person who could come in drunk, throw up, be charming 1 minute, have a freak out attack the next minute, but then come back the next day and clean up the whole house. So maybe that's where no, not you. But I think what's important with respect to the nodal thing is not about the cleaning up, it's the forgiveness of yourself for whatever you do, because Venus in Virgo and the South Node in Virgo can have a very narrow sort of grid of what one must be to be worthwhile. And your North Node, the point of growth or integration in Pisces, says, relax, relax. That intent, which is feeling in Pisces, is more important than content, which is earthy and Virgo.
You know, one of the senses that I get of this chart, I mean, retrograde Mercury, retrograde Mars, the aspects, there's a lot of aspects, but they're not exact. I mean, there's some strong aspects, but they're not exact aspects. And it's almost like there's certain issues in your life that are so strong that it's almost like sometimes you feel like maybe you're distracted and that it's hard to reach for certain, it's like radio stations that are playing that you can't quite get in tune sometimes. And that sometimes it's a struggle trying to figure out whether you're connecting with what it is you need to be or want to be connected with, or whether you're just simply being distracted or living whatever it is that's unfolding around you. Now, I don't know if that makes sense or not. That's not a specific astrological interpretation. It's more just based upon how the planets are scattered all around, and there's some real density with the Saturn-Uranus ascendant moon, except it's not a dense, I mean, a bunch of planets in Sagittarius is not dense. It's about ideas, it's about philosophy, it's about seeing the mountaintop far away and wanting to go there but knowing that it's farther away than you can ever go anyhow.
Over the last year, Pluto has passed over your Neptune, which is the death of illusions or dreams. Uranus is square Neptune, hopefully awakening new ones. It'll be a year or two when Uranus opposes Mercury, and Pluto comes along that you can sort of reconstitute a new set of goals and dreams. And I mean, I don't know what your life is, but just having a little one, that and two, takes an awful lot of attention, where individuation and your own adventures are likely to be on hold. But I think that perhaps you stepped out of something, stepped out of an illusion or a dream or a fantasy, and you've got a year or two to sort of, again, reconstitute it in a new and different form. Okay? All right. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Soul Food. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Craig and Clint and Lily or Sarah.
Oh, well, Craig just showed up. I don't see why he gets thanked.
Craig
Sarah
shows up
was working all day.
Craig shows up for the thank
applause.
yous and the party.
Yeah.
Let's give Craig a hand.
No, just one hand. No.
Yeah, like this. Craig.
Craig.
Give Craig a hand.
Here. Here's your hand. Hey. Yes. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rick. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks all. See you in May.
Wake up, mama. Don't you sleep so hard. Wake up, mama. Don't you sleep so hard. Don't you hear these blues walking all over you?